Hello. Hi. Thank you all so much for being here. Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the renewed and expanded campus of the Buffalo AKG Art Museum. My name is Cathleen Chaffee, and I am the Charles Balbach Chief Curator of this museum. It is also my first time using this lectern. Pretty excited. I would like to begin my remarks today by acknowledging the traditional occupants of the land on which we now sit. The first permanent gallery of the Buffalo Fine Arts Academy was constructed on the traditional land of the Seneca Onondaga, part of the Six Nations Confederacy, Haudenosaunee, and it is on this land that the Buffalo AKG resides today. The native occupants of this land were among the estimated 10 million Native Americans in pre-colonial North America who were displaced. As an institution, we collectively acknowledge this land as the traditional home of the Seneca and honor the Native American members of our community who continue to bear the burden of this history as they live nearby and among us. We are grateful to live, learn, and work on this land. The Buffalo AKG is honored to host today's Voices in Contemporary Art talk with artist Lap-See Lam, who is here with us today from Stockholm. She's just flown in and made a tight connection at O'Hare to do it. We are joined by Jasmine Chen, founder of the Asian Food and Culture Festival at Canalside, and restaurant owners Fanxu Meng from China Taste, Benjamin Zhang from Main Moon, and Zitao Ni from Quay Barbecue and Hot Pot King Crab. The occasion for this conversation, as many of you I'm sure know, is Lap-See Lam's stunning inaugural installation in our museum's Ronan Glassbox Theater, Dreamers Quay. It also continues a conversation that was begun by Lap-See and our colleagues in the Learning and Creativity Department when we were developing the gallery guide and interpretation for this exhibition. I'm so excited that this conversation will include restaurant owners who have family histories and immigrant experiences that are not unlike those that Lap-See explores in her amazing installation, which we'll discuss more shortly. Contemporary art is more than just pictures on a wall. It is a product of lived experience, and it can express the unique perspectives of people from all walks of life. As you all know, we recently completed the largest and most significant expansion to the museum's campus in its 161-year history. One of our foremost priorities during these years of building the museum, of community engagement, planning, and fundraising, has been to make this museum a more welcoming and accessible one, a museum that is truly for everyone in our community. That priority is reflected in the built environment, in our programming, our exhibitions, and in the works that we acquire for our fine art collection. I'm also pleased to say that if you didn't know, we've also added the work Dreamers Quay to the museum's permanent collection. In our expanded facilities, we finally have the space to do what has long been our institutional aspiration, which is to paint a fuller portrait of the field of modern and contemporary art, and it's a portrait that includes the voices and perspectives of those that have often been omitted from dominant narratives. I would like to thank Lap-See Lam for her work and for her vision. Thank you for being here with us. And thank you, Jasmine, Fanxu, Benjamin, and Zitao for helping us create new connections between art, the museum, and the world. Our conversation today will take place in a few parts, so I just want to run through them briefly to give you a lay of the land. First, I'm going to provide a kind of more extensive introduction to Lap-See Lam and her work currently on view. I'm then going to show a brief clip of the video just to give you a sense of context for those of you who might not have had the chance to see it yet. I, of course, invite you. The museum will be open after our program today. It's a great opportunity to then make your way to the Glassbox Theater, which is in the Gunlock building, and experience that work in person. I'm then going to ask Lap-See Lam a few questions about her work. Then it will be my pleasure to help moderate a conversation between Lap-See and our special guests on stage. I anticipate that our conversation will take about 50 minutes to an hour, hopefully max, and then we'll have an opportunity for some of your questions. Lap-See Lam is an installation artist born in 1990, and she lives, as I mentioned, in Stockholm, Sweden. Her work examines issues of identity and cultural constructs through an exploration of the Chinese diaspora in Sweden. She frequently draws on her family's history, such as their experiences as restaurant owners in Stockholm. She uses technologies such as virtual reality and 3D scanning to create immersive artworks like the one on view at the museum. Dreamers Quay from 2022 is one of Lam's most ambitious works to date. The 360-degree immersive moving image shadow play comprises 5 acts, during which we follow a young girl, Yan, who enters a mirror in her mother's Chinese restaurant and moves across centuries and between different mediated images of China. A tour de force examination of the Western fascination with the Far East, the work's narrative is also anchored in this young girl's conversation with the mysterious character of the singing chef, who she turns to as she tries to make sense of her journey. Lam builds her work around the historic tradition of the shadow play, which originated in Central Asia during the first millennium BCE and gained popularity in 17th century Europe and especially in France as ombre chinois. Like the Chinese restaurant and chinoiserie, it is itself a form of craft that has migrated. And Dreamer's Quay is a work where Lam uses this traditional form of entertainment and communication to examine and question cultural tropes and misperceptions. Lam's historical research into Sweden's relationship with China is what guides us through the events that are experienced in the installation. The story begins in 1978 in Quay's Garden, a Chinese restaurant in Stockholm. We follow our protagonist against 3 further locations that are influenced by the sea trade. They are, in order, the Chinese pavilion at Drottningholm in Stockholm in 1753, an East India vessel at sea in 1786, and a restaurant in the form of a dragon ship in Gothenburg that operated from 1991 to 2018. Throughout, it is the singing chef who contributes plaintive songs of loss and longing. He smokes cigarettes, and if you've seen the installation, his smoking is one of the things that really animates and brings the sense of magic to the way that Lam has broken down her narrative. And he shouts orders and instructions and advice, maybe not orders, he shouts advice at the young girl in Cantonese. An important through line of the work is the advice that he gives that the tongue is at the root of the heart. This is a work that helps illustrate how Western representations of East Asia often say more about the West than they do about the East. From the kitschy decor of the restaurant to the visual associations of shadow play to the built environments of chinoiserie, these form a condensed visual record of the ongoing processes of othering as well as exoticizing that continue to shape a Western image of the East today. While the work is rooted in Lam's own context and history, it also really accessibly examines what we think are universal questions that define the immigrant experience, whether that experience is taking place in Stockholm, in Buffalo, or anywhere else in the world. So next, I would like to share a brief clip, just like 2 or 3 minutes of the installation, just to make a little feeling of place. These are 2 stills from the installation on view, which has a sculptural element in the center and more than 10 channels of video and sound.
Have you heard the legend of the singing chef? It's 1978, and 15-year-old Zhang is standing in the kitchen with her hands in the sink.
I'm not spoiled. I'm standing here and washing dishes in a restaurant, aren't I?
One generation sacrificed itself for the next. Is it really logical that time erases all the hard work and dries the sweat that has settled like glue on the shoulders of our forebears?
Mom starts praying to her restaurant gods, and I go to the far end of the kitchen to smoke a cigarette. There's the rice barrel that I used to stick my hands into as a child. It was a game, or a kind of comfort. And now I want to do it again. 150 kilos of cold rice.
And Yang hears a voice calling her name. She's pulled down, her elbows, upper arms, upper body, all of her is folded up in the barrel.
The kitchen is dissolving. I see colors, red, black, and gold, flickering before my eyelids. It's raining dragon sails.
I have to apologize, of course, that this is only a sense of placemaking in relationship to the work itself, which is absolutely visually immersive and gorgeous with its sound. But it gives you a slight sense of the beginning of the narrative, of the work. So it is now my pleasure to invite our panelists to join me on stage. If you'd like to come up. Benjamin, Jasmine, Tiffany. Thank you. And as we do that, as they come and join me on stage, we're going to bring up the lights and like move the screen up so we don't blind our speakers with the projector's beam. Hello, making sure you can hear me. May I ask for a round of applause for our guests? Thank you so much, and thank you for our team managing the AV in the back. So, Lap-See, thanks again for being here. I have a couple questions for you, as I mentioned, and then I'm going to introduce Jasmine, and then we'll introduce the rest of our conversants today. So, Lap-See, I wonder if you could, I've tried to give a kind of, it sounds it's very art historical framework for your work, but I wonder if you could maybe talk on a more personal level about how'd you get started making this work, and how does it connect to your family's own history?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Yep. It's just a thank you for the introduction, by the way, and it also feels, I like to talk about this, like how it all started. Also because it didn't, I didn't engage in this from the beginning with the intention of making it into an artwork or having an audience for it. So it feels amazing that we're doing this today and that the work is here in the museum. But just to give some context, so I have a personal relationship to these spaces that I'm interested in. And my grandmother, the history of my grandmother is basically that she immigrated to the UK in the 60s from Hong Kong to work as a restaurant worker at several places in Chinatown. And then from there, she moved to Stockholm, where she got an opportunity to work as a chef at a Chinese restaurant. And then from there, she opened her restaurant 10 years later, in the 70s, together with her brother. So her experience and understanding of these type of Western Chinese restaurant and her experience from that and her kind of knowledge of how to sort of cater to a Western palate culminated in her opening her own restaurant. And what is also important to understand, like in my works and in my context, these restaurant workers weren't, interested in the cuisine of Chinese food or so in the beginning. This was something. This was like an opportunity of work for them, and an opportunity to get into the society for them. So
they didn't come to be a chef, right?
Exactly, they didn't come to be a chef, and my grandmother she calls this place her school, because that was also a way for her to bring her siblings from Hong Kong to Sweden, where they all did different tasks at this restaurant. And then eventually they all opened different restaurants throughout the whole Sweden. So there is a certain, when I started to think about this place in combination with the fact that my parents were selling this place in 2014, after many years, I felt that this part of history, especially in the Scandinavian area, it wasn't documented or talked about in this way, that this is actually part of the cultural history and such an important part of the, that talks about the history of the Cantonese diaspora throughout the world.
But so the kind of jumping off point, and you alluded to it now, the jumping off point, maybe we could say at the beginning of this work is the end of your grandmother's restaurant, right? So what was it about the restaurant closing that led you to start the artwork?
Yeah, I think, as many like second generation kids who are brought up at these spaces, you understand how much of an important place this becomes for our parents. And me and my siblings, we were always taught that, this is a place where we shouldn't end, sort of. So this is a place that also, they're working hard, they're creating this place, which is becoming a possibility for us to become something else that we can choose. So me and my siblings always had this kind of double relationship to this place, like honoring it, but at the same time feeling a distance to it. And that like doubleness or duality, understanding that also these places, especially the ones that were run and created by the Cantonese communities in the 70s, 80s, they were so much adapted and produced for the Western palate, so that one could essentially think about it as a stage or a theater that was ongoing, like a theater of the culture. And a lot of sacrifice had to be done in order for that to stay alive in terms of the market and so on. So I always saw it as a very constructed place. I understood that this was something like our culture or their culture is being commodified. But then at the same time, the real lives happen if you think about it as a stage and what happens behind the stage. So I think this duality and doubleness in the work is always, it is a starting point for all of my works, including Dreamers Quay.
Yeah, you mentioned sacrifice. Of course, there's the sacrifice of extremely hard work, but to make something into a stage, to make it into maybe a fiction or a version of a fiction, so much context has to get lost. So when you were growing up with this as one of your kind of really important family contexts, were you aware of the kind of presentation for a Western audience of, say, like chinoiserie or something like that, the kind of aesthetics that were making this stage happen?
Not in a formalized way. I didn't understand it from a theoretical point of view, but I could see that this performance was happening, and I could sense that in how I saw my parents were performing into this. Not only was it that the interior or the menu that they were adapting, but I could also kind of sense that in the way they were themselves performing. And that, I think, made me very aware about the performance of cultural identity and how complex it is. And that also makes me, for me, it's a very interesting point of view going into discussions or ideas about cultural identity and language and belonging from this kind of more complex question.
That kind of gets at, so like you started this by making kind of a 3D scan of this restaurant, almost as a way of preserving it before it was gone. Like I've done that in spaces before I had to move, like you take every photo you possibly can think of, but it'll never quite be enough. But then you've opened it up onto a lot of broader issues. I wonder, and we'll open this up to the broader conversation in a minute, but I wonder, before we do that, if you could talk maybe a little bit about your interest, because we started with the personal, but then we're going kind of broader and more maybe political, more general, in kind of diasporic issues of belonging or placemaking more generally. And I know that relates to other works of yours too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've always wanted to do was to use this space, especially the one that, I mean, for me, also, these questions started really in the material that I collected. So it started with the 3D scanning and having an idea that the 3D scanning in 2014, so this was like, now you can 3D scan things with your phone.
Early tech.
Early tech, 2014. And when I started doing that, that kind of made me understand what I was doing. I started 3D scanning, not actually the restaurant that my parent had, because the owner at that time, the new owner, was hesitant of letting me do that. So instead, I went on another path, collecting and 3D scanning other similar restaurants, because there are Ming Palace, Ming Garden, Jasmine Garden, etc., etc. So when I couldn't do that, that led me into trying to almost do it with these other restaurants. And then eventually I had this material, and when I worked with it in post-production, the computers at that time wasn't able to handle the material for the first, like it was too big and too large, as well as understanding that the 3D scanning was incomplete in the way that it captured the images. So this created a material which was totally incomplete, filled with holes and glitches and other material that only was created in this technical malfunction, basically. And then when I started, because initially I had this idea of creating hyper-realistic renderings of these spaces, perfect documentation. But then when I see these images through my computer that are incomplete, that opens up for me like a visual language that kind of responded with my feelings towards these spaces, like these places that are about to disappear, and that the image of Chineseness or the idea of China, that it is incomplete and it has this plasticity in it already. So that brought me into thinking about questions of like diaspora and questions of what could it be, language and belonging, that I just did it for myself, like from the beginning, and then I started looking into that.
So I think I have a question for you I maybe want to ask at the end, which is what you hope other communities, Chinese communities in Buffalo or any other audiences might take away from the work, but maybe it's a nice chance we talk together and then we can ask you that at the end. It's, especially after we hear some of our other speakers. So this is a good moment, I think, to invite our valued local guests into the audience, or into the conversation. And first I want to introduce Jasmine Chen.
Thank you.
Jasmine will then be asking, and then I'll be asking Fanxu and Benjamin and Zitao to introduce themselves after. So first, I'll introduce Jasmine. In addition to her role as the founder of the Asian Food and Culture Festival, Jasmine Chen is vice chair on the board of directors of the Chinese Club of Western New York, as well as the executive director of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. Her local work has consisted of partaking in and promoting cultural exchanges and charity activities to deepen Buffalo's appreciation of Chinese culture. And I also think we're very lucky to consider her a friend of the museum as well. And
Thank you.
Yes. So with Jasmine, I'd just love to ask you a couple questions to give people a bit of context. What is your role in the kind of Western New York Chinese community? So given those titles, what can you describe the work that you do? Can everyone hear Jasmine? Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So I'm the, like as you say, I'm the vice chair for the board director of the Chinese Club of Western New York, and also the director for the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. So beside that, I guess back to 2018 when they asked me to take over the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, then I come on an idea. I always wanted to do the Asian Food and Culture Festival. So,
and on a day-to-day basis, how do you sort of see the role of the Chinese club maybe in Western New York? What is the kind of work that goes on?
I think it's nice way to like Chinese club actually back to Lap-See originally formed as Chinese Club of Buffalo in 1954, and then we became a charitable nonprofit organization in 1988. So our mission actually is to focus on, to connect and celebrate our culture and heritage. And so, and also, of course, promote the networking exchange.
Could I ask you, this maybe puts you on the spot, could you say a couple words just about the history of the Chinese community here in Western New York?
I would say like before the 2018, we more like we were really silent, we just do everything inside the community. And then since 2019, we know we need to connect with the other community and we need to connect to the local, including the local governor. I see the Zhang here, our legislator, and also so that way we can bring in, like more cohesive and vibrant community together.
And this is sort of the scale of the Chinese community in Buffalo and the history of their presence here has gone on, throughout the history, I think, of the region. Is that accurate? So, like, there's a long history of a Chinese community here in Western New York.
Yes. So I do search a little bit about the history of Chinese immigrants in Buffalo. Actually, Chinese immigrants appear to begin settling in Buffalo in late 1800s. At the time, most of them they established the Chinese restaurants and laundries. I still remember, I think most of those restaurants located in the Michigan Street, Buffalo, above Broadway, and Arc Street and William Street. And actually one day I drove by Michigan Street. Actually I saw the building. They still have a ceramic tile in red and green color. So I figured this could be one of the original Chinese restaurants. So,
thank you. It's a good guess. So I want to introduce, I think just in order, I'm going to ask each of our local restaurant owner guests to sort of introduce themselves, and I'll just ask each of you like a question, and then I'll ask you some more. But so Benjamin,
yes.
you own Main Moon.
I'm in the process of taking over for my parents.
I see. Well, this is very timely in relationship to our conversation today. So can you tell me then a little bit about the story of your restaurant?
I'm not sure much of it, but I would take over. My parents came here around my sophomore years, around 2008, I believe. And then he was taking over from my great uncle. He had 3 restaurants, but in the years up to 2008, he sold off most of them, and he was planning to retire. And the restaurant my parents took over was the second one he owned, and they didn't keep up with the facade very much. They just keep up focus on service and the food, and then they were rewarded with 90-pack, pretty much full dining, and pretty much very busy every night. And a lot of people like it, and then he just contributed to the community by donating to school games and maybe church events. Occasionally, I'm not sure much of it. And then after we took over, because it was second in the restaurant that my parents take over, but they doesn't speak much English, so the relationship with the community falters greatly because the restaurant is very all-consuming. So we just have some acquaintances and some friends and regulars from the old times. And then I was at school, and then school and work is very much so. I also didn't have much connection with the community either. But we tried to make up to it, but I'm not sure. It's kind of difficult after the first time the newlies. It's hard to make friends and connections after a long time to restart it. So we still try to build out the relationship with the local church and my old high school. And still, we try to keep it as it is and maybe improve it some parts.
Thank you so much. I mean, one of the main kind of topics or subthreads, not just in Lap-See's work, but in our discussion today, has to do with kind of family lineage and family history. So I hope we'll come back to that question also. So Fanxu, thank you for being here. So you own China Taste.
Yeah.
When did China Taste open?
Yeah, we opened 2016, almost like 7 or 8 years. Yeah, but so we are not the family restaurant. So yeah.
You said you are a family restaurant.
We are not.
You are
we
not.
Are not. Yeah, family restaurant like a ham.
So
you know?
tell me the story though of the restaurant then.
Yeah, so the China Taste, located the Hearst of Amherst next to the UB, the North Campus. So we mostly do the authentic, the real Chinese of like the northeastern, the Chinese styles. So we just use like the traditional cooking way. And do every single one freshly open to the orders. So even like our famous the handwork dumplings. So anything you like, you can. We have because so we do every single freshly. When the customer come in, you can ask for any option when you order. Even you like the spicy or some kind of thing the sweet. So we can offer that for every single one. So that mostly, so in China there have a lot of different kind of the styles, the foods. Yeah, I come from the Xi'an city. That's the northeastern of China. So most of our northeastern Chinese like some taste of the heavy taste and the taste to the spicy. So because that's a kind of our northeastern culture, the living, because our city is still living like Buffalo here. So there have 4 seasons. So in the winter, because one thing, maybe that's kind of a lot of people used to that. That's one thing story I gotta share here. So because in winter still the cold, even colder here. So they like eat spicy for the driving away the cold.
So we have buffalo wings, right?
Yeah, yeah, and also so they have because why? So our northeastern the taste heavy because we like eating some the salty pickles. That's salty pickles. So that's why so we like the taste the heavy and the taste tends to be spicy. So our style is still like that too. So because mostly, so we use the high quantity of the seasonal ingredients, and so we are like mostly for the not the southern people, just for the northeastern people. They like the eating about the boldly and enjoyable, so some kind of food with the bright colors, and also so some we using we enhance some the ingredients of the help of green onions and the garlic, for enhance the flavor. and also enhancing like the color of with the soy sauce. Yeah, so I think the mostly so we like to do that. So and our traditional the northeastern the cooking method like stewing, the popping, and some grilling, and some kind of like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I appreciate it. And so Zitao, you have actually 2 restaurants, Quay Barbecue and Hot Pot King Crab. Can you tell me, are these family restaurants, both of them?
Yeah, that's my name, family restaurant.
No. So can you tell me the story of one of them? Yeah. So do you want to come up? You can come and use my microphone. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe, let's see, could we have it just a chair? Here, come and sit. Here, come sit. Yeah, of course. We have chairs right here. Jillian will hand me one. Here. Yeah.
Okay, much better. I kind of, so I'm Lisa, I'm actually the wife of Tao. Trying to help him because he speaks limited English, so I want to make sure we express our sincere thank you for the invitation today, and Jasmine, for allowing us to enter this event. So I'm going to introduce my husband and his experiences. So Zitao came to the States in the early 1990s and started working in restaurants to make a living. From our restaurant experiences he gained, and he was able to start the Mandarin Court Chinese restaurant in 2010. And from there, he was able to develop more businesses opportunities throughout Rochester, Buffalo, and Orlando, Florida. So currently, Tao owns Mandarin Court Chinese restaurant, Dragon Palace Restaurants in Rochester, New York. He also owns the King Crab over in Williamsville and the soon-to-open Quay BBQ and Hot Pot in Amherst. We also have another King Crab in Orlando, Florida. Mandarin Court restaurant is really our fundamental restaurant, so it's like it's really the Tao's first restaurant, and from there, I guess, you know, it really is a small 900 square feet delivery and takeout restaurant. But it did so well that it really gave us the confidence of continue our adventure, you know, in developing more restaurants in the Western New York area. In addition to that, I mean, just kind of just a little brief overview. We have a 20-year-old daughter who is at the University of Rochester, you know, is right now majoring in biochemistry on the pre-med track for hoping to become a neonatal cardiovascular surgeon. So that's totally different than restaurant owning, but I guess, you know, that's our only child, and the restaurant really helped us supporting her education and continue her education, and hopefully she'll become whatever she wants to be down the road.
Thank you so much. Lisa, is that?
That's all we have.
That's all for now. Well, we have more questions, but actually I wanted to ask, Lap-See, do you have questions for anyone on the panel?
No, I'm just so happy to meet everyone, and I feel there's so many restaurants I have to visit on my day off tomorrow.
Yeah, you have Sunday, and everything will be empty because there's a game, so you can go eat anywhere you want.
But also, I mean, this is also such a great representation of like how large the Chinese cuisine really is. And for example, the Cantonese cuisine is much more bland in the taste and not spicy at all. And it really is about different regions of cooking. The way that the way that the menu is what I know from the Swedish Chinese restaurant. It's very different from these type of restaurants. So just want to emphasize that we find similarities, but there's also the histories are so different.
Yeah. Very much so. I mean, I was so interested in reading. So everyone on stage, in the restaurant owners all participated in kind of a really interesting conversation that took place to prepare the gallery guide. I think I mentioned this in my opening remarks. And to help kind of contextualize this exhibition as we were thinking about who its different audiences might be. You know, on one level, of course, it's a beautiful installation, so it reaches absolutely anyone who's interested in looking at art. But also thinking about for whom it might resonate, you know, particularly. So it was so great to hear some of your stories in writing and then to hear them again today. I was wondering, Lap-See, if you could talk a little bit about this question of kind of family history, and it came up in, you know, in a different way in everyone's remarks, and then maybe we can ask someone else to speak on it too. For some families, doing exactly what their parents did is what would make them the most happy. And for many families, it's the opposite, of course. How has that played out kind of for you in your research into the history of the Chinese restaurant in the diasporic context, so outside of China?
You mean how this question is like played out in?
Yeah, I mean, how have you've now made this is the subject of your research.
Yeah.
So, in addition to
Right.
being your own personal story.
So in one way, I am
Yeah.
kind of carrying on with the restaurant in one way. Yeah, I mean, I still try to understand why I'm doing this and why I'm so occupied by this theme. And I've been doing it for, I mean, this is what you saw is sort of the third major work of like a larger body of work or a trilogy or how you call it. And I keep coming back to this theme, although maybe sometimes it's in different contexts or a longer history or a shorter history and so on. But I think for me it's also about like sort of a separation to the place or like the longest farewell, sort of, that I'm doing. And in my work, I also, so the voice that you heard, so the work that is shown here was, it was made in Swedish with the voices and the voice actors. And the voices that you heard are, so the tree is my brother, the voice of the tree. The voice of Ayan is actually my cousin's daughter. And then we have the singing chef, my father. So the family lineage is already included in that. So we have my father, the former restaurant proprietor, my brother, who is like me, and then the third generation, who is my cousin's daughter. And they also had a restaurant, my aunt. And for me, it's like, I don't know, I'm just trying to gather everyone. And I want to talk about these questions in a way that we are also remaking our history, sort of, and gaining agency over it again. And it's not like formulated like when I engage my father that I have an idea of exactly what this character means. So I have this idea of creating this potential in this character together with him. But then, of course, I include things that, for example, the singing chef, he's singing a lot. And my dad is always singing. And I'm thinking about what would he potentially have, what would he do if he wasn't running, if he wasn't a restaurant proprietor? Would he be a singer? So it's like I know it's like so many different puzzles of things that I'm trying to do with the work.
This just made me think of a question, maybe for Tao and Lisa. So, what kind? You're talking about your daughter. What kind of? So the singing chef is always shouting advice. What kind of advice are you always shouting, or saying nicely? Yeah, because the singing chef, who's the character of her father, kind of in the video, is always giving the young girl advice in the restaurant, sort of in the setting of this history story.
So we portray to allow our daughter to have her understand our own where we came from. Even though we have one daughter, we probably have, we're paying a hefty tuition for her, and I still make her pay me back. So don't know how that's gonna happen, but or I tell her, we'll make an arrangement. When you go to med school, you have to pay your own tuition. So I'm so glad that after 2 more years, I'm done with your tuition. That type of stuff. So she knows how hard we work to get where we are today. She chose a really hard career to go forward with, I think. But I think she's a hard worker. She also has 2 jobs on herself. Like, in addition to study, go to labs and recitations, she actually have other 2 research lab jobs that she is working currently to try to, A, gain her little fortune to, go out with her friends, B, to earn some extra credit so she does not have to take additional courses to complete her bachelor's degree first. So I think my daughter is a hardworking young woman who has a mind of her own, who knows how hard her parents are working to get to where she is today and tomorrow, and that she herself is a very good worker at the restaurant when we needed her, although she changes, daily. But if we ask her, she'll work. But she, has helped us a lot, like tremendously, in obtaining many different type of licenses, and such as the restaurant worker's license, the manager's license, the all kinds of license that she can earn, as a young kid, to help us get to where we need to be at our restaurant and our business. So I have to say that even though she's the one child in this family and she's spoiled by everybody else, she's also a very hardworking kid and knows exactly where she wants to go for the future.
Thank you so much. Benjamin, I was wondering if you could talk about what it means to you. You said you're in this moment of transition, which is, one of those life moments that you'll always look back on. What does it mean to you to be taking over what is now a family tradition?
It's very complicated because before and while in school, I had dreams of being maybe a psychologist, and then after a while, after my junior year, I was planning to go to the Air Force because they pay for tuition. But because in China, this culture, Chinese culture, family is very strong, so you don't go far when your parents are alive. And so the restaurant business is pretty much consuming all of them, and they need my help because they don't speak much English. I help out in the summer and after school to help out in the front, taking the telephone, so I don't have much free time. So slowly it become part of me, and then I don't have any other time for extracurriculum, so I slowly fall back on I give up my dream of being a psychologist and then just take some courses online and do some writing on the side, and then mostly focus on the restaurant, and then they're but because I don't have any other extracurriculums, so sometimes I cannot help them. Translation is hard if like legal problems or filing for anything, complaints, or legal license we try to do once, but I cannot get the legalese right, and then so there's a lot of problems, and then so we failed on that, and so we just settled down to the status quo, and then so it's like sometimes I feel like I'm a failure because I cannot help them out, spend to another restaurant or getting more customers and improve on the business. Yeah, so it's kind of hard. But I'm trying to improve myself and study on the side when I have times.
We talk a lot about here, we have a restaurant here at the museum. We talk about the art of food, and this is a euphemism, of course, because we're an art museum, so we put art together with food, but what it is it's the art of welcome. And it's so clear to me that that's something that you're building, and our other guests here today are building in such an important and special way. I want to open this up to questions from the audience, but first I would just like to thank them all so much for being here. I will just repeat questions. If anyone wants to say it, I'll repeat it so that those who can't hear can understand. So anyone have a question for any of our guests? Yes.
Okay, so question for Lap-See. Like, a lot of your work, like as you said, deals with like your relationship to spaces, and like from what I can understand, Dreamer's Quay is like a very like immersive work. So it kind of comes to mind about VR. Like VR technology. Like I think back when you started, like VR wasn't at like how it is right now, and it's still got a ways to go. But I just wanted to ask if you have any plans on like incorporating VR into future works.
So the question is, is Lap-See, I have a feeling the answer is yes. Is Lap-See exploring VR, virtual reality? So if anyone has ever seen those sort of headsets that allow you to have kind of a 3D immersive view of a world that was created digitally to give the illusion of three-dimensionality.
Yeah, I already did a work in VR. So the three works that I mentioned, so we have Mother's Tongue, the very first work, and then the second one is actually a VR work, and then the third one is Dreamer's Quay. But the way, I mean, it's such a good question because the way that the work is made in VR. So to technically describe it in a simple way, it basically, it's made in this real-time engine called Unity. And I always, when I get the opportunity to exhibit at spaces like this, I always create like a three-dimensional model or replica of that work. And then the work is created in that space. So Dreamers was made for another place, Bonniers Konsthal. It was commissioned for that work, and then I adapted it for this space. But the way that I work is very closely linked with VR, and I always, it's part of the process where I also use the headset to understand or how to kind of understand the spatial form of how this will become in the space, because I can't work, you know, I couldn't do this in the space here, right. So I have to do it in another representative way. But there is a VR work, and I will give you the link to it.
But I mean, one of the hallmarks of VR is it gives the person the experience of kind of being there, quote unquote, and that's of course what the installation does, even here without the headset. Other questions? Yes. The question is it worth it to have left everything? Your home, everything.
For me, I moved here very young, around age of 9, so I don't have much memory of my hometown. For my family, they're here for better opportunities, and they say it's worth it. They just come because the hometown right now is only my grandmother and my grandfather, and there's no young people like me. There's all migrants from other places. So it's just the hometown is completely changed. So here we got our extended families, relatives I got a relative in over the place, like Hawaii, California, Michigan, Maine, Oregon, and Seattle, and West Virginia. So we got an extended family here in the United States.
I'd say that it's totally worth it. I came to the States when I was 11. My husband came when he was 18. To us, United States is really our first family because I don't remember what really back home what happened. Our immediate family's here. We got married here. Our kid is here. And the United States has given us so much opportunities that we may not be able to get when we are in China, as I look back. So I think the experience is definitely worth it, and this country is, you know, one of the best things that we can ask for to be in. So,
Fanxu.
Yeah, I think the United States gonna have a little fair the opportunity for everyone. So that's a kind of the real life. So I don't have to think about a lot of the life or work. So right now, temporary, that's a kind of the a life work. So that thing, the most thing, so it's a very, very fair for freedom for every people. Yeah, that's a kind of, I think.
But so you sort of said like your life is work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a work. So and also that's a service. So the service of the community, the Chinese community, because we do the most. We like to do the make the most the authentic food to our Chinese community, because I been to a lot of the Chinese restaurant. They only do the like Western or American style. That totally we do different. That only that's a kind of the sauce stuff. Just you gonna taste like just 3 or 4 cans of sauce. But we do a lot of different. Maybe one item you can taste the tastes. So the most the real Chinese customer, even like the Chinese international student, they're looking for some kind of food like us, right?
Jasmine,
Yeah.
do you want to answer that too?
I totally agree with that. It's totally worth it. I came to here in 1989 with my parents. At the time, I was about 16 years old, and I kind of have negative memory about my country, China. At the time, I know I can't do anything at my age, actually, you know. So when I came to USA, I feel, wow, this is great. I can work. So I can support my family. So I actually I went to the high school, so I get out of school, I can go to work and help my parents. So I kind of feel like I'm so proud of myself at the time. So I feel like I'm valuable, you know, but in China, I see most of people will tell you, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you know. But here, you can do what you want to do, and you have opportunity to chase your dream. Actually, I owned a restaurant before too. So my daughter, Crystal is my daughter. At the time, you know, me and my husband, we own a small restaurant. And so I bring my daughter at the restaurant. She helped me with, you know, treat the customer, you know, help me out a little bit. So.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was a great question. And embarrassing the daughter, which is always good. Yeah. Yeah.
She's my friend.
One of my best friends, really, this, and her daughter I know so well too. I was just wondering, do you think, in Buffalo, my mother used to say that her mother was from Ireland, that the Irish in Buffalo are more Irish than the Irish in Ireland, and the Polish in Buffalo are more Polish than the Polish in Poland, and because we love our heritage. Do you think, and I think that's the way about the Chinese club now, that we have so much, you know, Chinese club, it's so great, and so I was wondering, is that unique to Western New York, or is that everywhere, that there's such a strong, in Amherst we have 9% is Asian in Amherst of the population, and do other communities have such a close, like with social and arts and everything as we do it in Buffalo?
So I'm just going to repeat that really briefly, which is there is a strong, I like the Irish are more Irish here, I like that, but there is a strong Asian community with a lot of passion and a lot of engagement, as she was describing in Amherst. Does that feel, and maybe your experience is mainly local, but it's a good question for Jasmine anyway. Does it feel like that's something that's special about this region? And if so, do you have a guess why?
I think Buffalo is special, and Buffalo is the most friendly neighborhood here. Every time, like, actually back to when Jim may know a little bit more about me, and at the time when I was thinking about doing an Asian Food and Culture Festival, so I reached out to Jim and reached out to Empress Town, and they all really supportive, and so everybody's really friendly. So I feel like, oh yes, actually I can make things happen. So before I just I always think about do it, but I never tried to putting it into action, you know. So until I know more, people won't. Maybe some other area maybe is that maybe some people always talk about discrimination, but here I feel people are more friendly than everywhere else.
I mean, you're getting back to that question of welcome and how important, I mean, just something as simple as welcome can be and it can change, I mean, like encouraged you to do the work that you've been doing, yeah.
Yes.
Other questions, yeah. Yeah.
So this is a question for Lap-See. So in your brief sort of overview of your family's background, and you were saying that your grandmother immigrated to the UK in the 60s, and that's when she first started working in restaurants. Then in the 70s, opened a restaurant in Sweden, but that wasn't her plan initially in immigrating, and that you, growing up in this sphere, were told that, or not told that, but there was the expectation that you weren't to stay in the restaurant, that wasn't the goal. I was wondering, could you speak a little more on sort of what those conversations were like in your family, and if there was, what sort of emotions surrounded those expectations, or that, even that path that your grandmother was led on in immigrating and doing something that wasn't necessarily her passion or goal to do.
So in very brief, what were conversations like in Lap-See's family around this question of pursuing a path that had been maybe laid by her grandmother or not?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's something that resonates so much of what I hear here. But there wasn't so much of a dialogue, when I was growing up. My parents were constantly working, and the time that we got to meet them was basically when we were at the restaurant. But there was always this underlying understanding that we are working hard, and they were very open with it. Like, you should understand and see how hard we're working so that you can choose your path. And also, I think, in combination with very little nostalgia about, very little about where the background to the restaurant or the background to our family history and so on. And I think that is also a reason why I'm doing this. I'm trying to dig into that. Yeah, I think it's hard to describe that relationship, I think, but it's something that you maybe don't hear by the words, but you can feel it by being there, I think.
Any other questions? John? Yeah.
Lap-See, when did you know you wanted to be an artist?
So John asked, when did Lap-See know she wanted to be an artist?
That's such a good question. I didn't have any role models. I didn't know anyone that were an artist. So for me, it was something that didn't exist as a possibility. But I was drawing a lot as a child. I was quite shy and introvert, and I have 3 siblings. My 2 older brothers, they had their things. They were doing sports, and one was doing computers. So left for me was like drawing and these kind of things. But I think I understood that I had a little bit talent for it when my older brother, he asked me to do his drawing assignment. I think it was something like making like a fashion collection or making like costume for something. And I'm 3 years younger than him, and I managed to fool his teacher that he had done this, and he got the best grade.
So you drew it in the style of your brother?
Yes, I tried to imitate like this teenage boy and like what his interest was. So I think I kind of understood, there's something here that maybe I'm good at. But I mean, yeah, it took a long time until I went to art school and so on, did other things before that. But I think yeah, it was good to remember this. Thank you for the question.
I mean, I think a parent who's half paying attention would worry that a child is going to become an artist and it doesn't look like they do anything, they're not working, it's not hard. And a parent who's really paying attention knows that they should hope their kid isn't an artist because it's way too hard. It's such an unbelievably hard job. Yeah, other question? Okay, yes, in Stripe, and then we'll stop, yeah, thank you.
I have a question about the reception of your work in Sweden versus in the U.S. Because Sweden, we have always seen ourselves as a country of immigrants and, very multicultural. Sweden more recently has recognized its immigrant populations and its multiculturalism. So I'm just wondering, I don't know how much you've spoken about your work in the U.S., what experience you have with the reception of your work here versus there, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
A little bit about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a difference, and I've showed my work not only here but also in New York quite recently, and I think because the discourse around this is much larger here in the US, and also the history of Chinese immigration is much longer. So I think there is that difference. And where I try to make that it very clear that what my history is very different from the American Chinese immigration history. But in Sweden, I think my work has been well received, and I think it's also because of the timing that people also get to talk about these questions through my work. And through also a very relatable subject, the Chinese restaurant that is everywhere in Sweden. And just to give a little bit of context to that, the Swedish food or restaurant culture was very small in the 60s and 70s. There were basically these local pub kind of places. And then the restaurants that opened were very much traces of the immigration waves. So for Italian, we had the Italian restaurants, the pizzerias, because of the Italians. And then came the Chinese, the Hong Kong Chinese, and then came the Chinese restaurants. So people are very familiar with these Chinese restaurants, and they see it almost like a Swedish part, like a Swedish identity, the Swedish Chinese restaurants. Because these restaurants are also so accommodating to families, and people, even the ones that are not the most privileged, can afford going to a Chinese restaurant in Sweden. So almost everyone has a relationship to a Chinese restaurant. So when I use this as the subject matter, I think people get interested, and I also intentionally want to make my work receptive. Like I want people to feel it, and I want people to feel something from it, even though you don't have the pre-knowledge of what I do or the other stuff around it. And when I make my work, I always think that the generation before me and the generation after me should be able to feel something or to understand it. So my grandmother should understand it, and I don't have kids, but I have a lot of nieces, so they should understand it. And I felt that they felt something from it.
So Lisa, Tao, Fanxu, Benjamin, Jasmine, Lap-See, thank you all so much for being here with us today, and thank you for being